Before we begin the program, here's a few notes. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. TechGrow Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the TechGrow Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
So what generation are we, Victor? G1, G2, or G3?
Oh, good question. I guess it depends on what context, right? Because and when it comes to our family, I'd say we're G1. And our kids are G2, and our grandchildren, future grandchildren, here's hoping for future grandchildren, would be G3. But then when I think of my parents, if they're G1, then I'm G2, so the idea being I'd like to think that we're G1.
Mm-hmm. And when we look at our business, we're G1 because we are the ones that started it.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And so this conversation about G1, G2, G3, I don't know if our audience is hearing that a lot, but I feel like we're hearing that a lot, and we're exploring the conversation about G1, G2, G3 as we look at how it applies to our own practice and the longevity of our practice. And for those of you who may have heard or not have, or are listening, our G2 and G3 is on our mind for TechGrow Financial. And we can think about it in terms of our personal family and our parents, and think that, we are G2 there, and we are excited about where our kids are going, the G3, but also thinking about what's going on with our G1 parents. And we start thinking about healthcare. We start thinking about finances for our parents as we're stuck in this sandwich generation. Another word for G2, I guess. But this is in the air, and as we get closer to the holidays, I think this is something that, Victor, you brought up as something we really need to start talking about on our podcast.
Yeah, and if you haven't figured it out already, the G stands for generation, right? So generation 1, 2, and 3. And the purpose of this podcast was really exactly that, is securing your future but preserving your legacy. And I think the concept and the conversations around legacy has taken on a whole lot more importance, not just for ourselves, but also for our clients, especially those that own a small business and are thinking about the next generation. And a lot of this is a topic that we've covered in the past, so this isn't new ground. But I think the emphasis there in discovering, and in talking to people, you find many people who have yet to actually have a will. And if you don't have a will, you're unlikely to have a trust. And so we want to kind of go through why that matters and why it's important, because so much of our focus is helping families prepare for retirement, prepare for their future. And it is kind of like, okay, so you've done all the work to create a financial plan. You're approaching retirement. You've got a nest egg that you're deriving some income from. But what happens next? What happens with all this wealth that you've accumulated? And if you have any plans on wanting to pass that on to the next generation, well, there's some avenues and things you should take into consideration.
Yeah. And so this is planning season. As our clients know, we like to break up the year. Beginning of the year, we're doing a lot of investment reviews and looking at taxes and all that stuff, because that's what you do at the beginning of the year, right? You evaluate your year before and look at what's going to happen in the future. And then in the second half of the year, we like to talk about planning topics and what to do with funds in retirement planning. And what I'm seeing, because our clients have done so well, I'd like to think we have been responsible for a little part of that, is that at the end, the conversation I have is you don't win the race in life if you end up at the end of your life with this big amount of money in your bank accounts. Maybe you should have spent a little bit more enjoying life while you were able to. It's something we have to talk about, because if there is money at the end of your life, how do you want that spent in the next generation? And I think that people don't think about that enough because they're just worrying about their own lifespan. But what I'm seeing is that there is usually some left over, and especially here in the Bay Area, where you have your largest asset is your home, and then you have your investment assets. And sometimes they're about the same, sometimes they're different. But I think what I feel we really need to concentrate and spend some time on is having our clients think about how they want to pass on that nest egg to the next generation.
Yeah, I would put this under those good problems to have, right? But when you say it's a good problem, it's still a problem, right? That needs to be met. And so, as Kim pointed out, whether you're passing these assets to a loved one or perhaps donating it to a charitable cause or supporting an institution that really matters to you, it's important to have this very structured plan that is going to provide that peace of mind, knowing that you've left a series of instructions as to what to do with the money once you're no longer here. And so, like I said, it's a good problem to have, but you want to make sure that it's more about creating a nest egg for your own lifestyle. But if you are so lucky to have something, could you affect the lifestyle of the next generation, G2 or G3, depending on where you are in your life stage, or provide to those things that really matter to you, your charities or institutions?
Right. And so I'd like to scratch the word inheritance, because I think inheritance is just a pile of money that somebody gets and spends most of it and then leaves a little behind for the future. I would rather look at the money that's left behind as legacy, because I love the word. It says that you are leaving a legacy, maybe like cookie crumbs on your path. And so when we think about where do you want to leave that, and Victor detailed a list of different options for you to have when you leave that money, when you no longer are here, is to think it's not one or the other. You can leave a legacy that will impact many lives, not just your own families.
And I think that one of the things that has kept people, from doing a trust, like a lot of people might do a will, okay, because that at the very basic, especially if you start having family and you're thinking, okay, now it's more than just things that I may own that I may want to give. Now I have children. Now I have these little people. And so most of the time people, the first time people actually start with a will, I think, is as they start having a family, because they want to provide instructions to say, if something was to happen to us, worst case scenario, where's my child going to go? And a lot of that is a conversation you may have with a close family member or a friend or someone to say, hey, if something happens to me, then can you look after my child? And I think that that's where the will comes in. I think people hesitate in getting a trust because they think, well, I don't have the assets for it. I don't have enough money to justify creating a trust. And I think that what we want to dispel is the myth that, no, you don't have to have much to at least start thinking about the trust, because it's more than just instructions for the money. It could be healthcare directives. It could be power of attorney for an elder parent or grandparent. So there are more things involved in the trust than it is just about instructions for money.
Right. And so the first question I would say is, what do you want people to say, and what do you want the thoughts about you to be when you're no longer living? Because there is a life that you've lived, there's a value that you've instilled in your kids, and that can be carried on beyond the days of your life. And I think that when you look at a will versus you look at a trust, you can control so much and add your values into that trust document more than you can with just a will. I'll add the caveat, we're not attorneys, so we cannot make advice and give you recommendations on what are the right types of trusts or documents that you may want to have. But as financial planners, there's a lot we can help guide you through on this estate planning course. And so we do encourage you to come to us with the estate planning ask, right? Let's get this done for you. And because there's a lot we can do without needing to involve an attorney, and the attorneys are there for the more detailed recommendations and advice if you need that when it comes to very complicated family matters and trusts.
I think, we went through the process ourselves. This is a number of years ago, and part of it was exactly that, because we felt, well, it was an important aspect of our own financial planning and providing instructions specific to what we wanted to do if something was to happen to us, what we would do with the business, what would happen with the kids, what would happen with the assets that we've accumulated, our home and what have you. And it was a great conversation. And this is where it starts. It starts with a conversation to start outlining, as Kim had first started saying, about values, what it is that you want to pass along, how would you like to be remembered. And I know it's a morbid kind of conversation or a thing to think about. Nobody wants to think about them passing away. But you do have some ideas. And I think that in starting those conversations, whether it's with your spouse or on your own or with your family, as Kim has pointed out, as we start approaching the holidays, is a good time to start thinking about these things and having serious conversations, especially if you don't have a will and you don't have a trust. And then the next step could be to work with us as far as helping you, guide you through the process. And like Kim said, the last element of that is exactly that, is an attorney who would actually execute the specific documents that get signed. And then, the stage after that is retitling things under the trust. And what we're really looking for is creating that peace of mind that there are specific instructions and that you've gone through the exercise to know exactly what it is that you want to have done.
Yes, and for those who may think they've got that box checked, if it's been longer than 3 to 5 years, I would encourage you to review it. We are happy to review existing trusts. And sometimes, what that involves is just giving you a visualization of where your money is going when you're gone, because you write this trust and you may have forgotten the things that you put in that trust because it's been a long time since you met with that attorney. And so that's an area that we can really help you with. Again, going back to the whole idea of why do we do this and thinking about a legacy, I want to think of this sum of money as your legacy. That is a gift that can be given for a long time. It doesn't have to have an end date or an expiration. This is something that the dividends of that gift can be there for your children, but it can also be there for your church or your favorite charitable organization and last a lot longer than your lifetime. And so having a trust and that document where you can really explain how you want that money to be left as a legacy, so it isn't all spent, right after you pass away, but is aligned with your values, I think is something that people don't spend enough time thinking about.
Yeah. And I think the other aspect to that, when we talk about legacy planning in this case, it's also that opportunity for those that are so lucky to create that generational wealth, wealth that can be passed on from one generation to the next and to the next. You see this happening with endowments and foundations, and it's really taking a page from what they've done to create this legacy that can continue. So it may not just be to G2, G3, it could be G4, G5. If it's structured in such a way of thinking, longer term, there's that opportunity. And we have a number of resources, which we'll include in the show notes. So I'd love to reference, we started season 1 of this podcast talking about money, and there's a couple of podcasts there that are worth looking or listening to again or revisiting if it's been a while. And it's talking about money for couples, talking about money with your kids and aging parents. And then we also had the good fortune of having Barb Pretlove, who's an estate planning attorney who did our will and trust, on season 2 in episode 8. And she goes into a little bit more detail, but the content is still the same. I mean, it's important content to provide guidance as to what to consider when it comes to developing a will and a trust.
So we'll get really personal. I hope my kids are listening to this, or will listen to this someday.
Or we'll play it in front of them so they're listening to it with us.
Right. But like the visualization I have for us when we are no longer here is this sum of money that we've accumulated is to help them make their life better by them using, the dividends, the interest off of the assets, but I do not want them spending the principal. I want that to continue for their kids, to make their kids' life a little bit better too. And so that this can keep going.
Yeah, and
after we're gone.
And I think that'll matter to them just as much as my large vinyl collection, which they'll probably fight over. So I don't know. We'll have to say like A through M goes to Mika, and then N through Z goes to Noah, or something like that.
I think that's going to be a bigger headache.
I know.
And that one will be really emotional.
That one will be emotional. So anyways, I think the point of the whole podcast, going back to what it's called, which is securing your future and preparing for a legacy, is exactly that. And we just want to let you know that we are a resource, at least in initiating that conversation. So if you don't currently have a will or a trust, we could be your first stop in having that conversation and exploring your options. And if you have one, as Kim pointed out, and you haven't revisited in a couple of years, it's a good time to take another look.
And I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about the differences of what is in your will and trust versus what is not in your will and trust.
Okay.
Your IRA assets, which for most is the largest chunk of assets that aren't in their home. Mm-hmm. And the home should be titled in the trust, but the IRA assets don't go in a trust. They have their own set of beneficiary instructions on them. And so I bring this up because you either want to make sure that those beneficiary instructions match the trust so there's no confusion, no hurt feelings, or explain why it's different to the ones you're passing it on to. And as a final thought, I love to see charitable organizations attached not to the trust assets per se, but to the IRA assets, because that is the most tax efficient way to pass down those IRA assets. If you plan to leave to charitable organizations, it should be in the IRA. Because when your kids receive IRA assets, they will have to pay income taxes on that, and they'll have to pull it out over 10 years. If it's during a normal life cycle, it may be your kids' highest income earning years of their lives, and so a lot of it will be taken out for taxes. However, if that money is given to a charitable organization, that charitable organization pays no taxes. And so it's the best asset to leave to charitable organizations.
Yeah, so it starts with the real comprehensive review of existing assets, which ones make the most sense, as it relates, or I should say what makes most sense on the distribution side, whether if you're going to a charitable organization, from which pool you're pulling from, whether it's the IRA or from your investable assets under the trust. So there's definitely a lot of things to consider, and that's where I think we come in, right?
Right.
And just kind of help you through that process.
We love to have those conversations that should be geared towards legacy planning. Initial conversations should be between us and our clients, and then we can always give you advice on how to have those conversations with the next generation, or host those conversations as well, based on what your wishes are.
Yeah, so we hope this is helpful. Like I said, it's not a topic that's new. We've discussed this before in earlier seasons of our podcast, but now that we have some additional software, additional resources at our disposal, I think we can kind of help move this along much quicker. And so if you're interested in learning more, please contact us. We'll leave a contact link on our show notes. as well as you can find us on our website at techgirlfinancial.com or any one of our social platforms. So if you think this is something of interest, or if you just have questions, please reach out to our team.
Yes, and we would love to start your legacy.
That's right. And whether you're G2, G3, G4, or G1 like us, we're ready to have that conversation. So thanks again for listening, and we hope to see you soon or talk to you soon.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies.